Relatively boring staged election campaign, but one of the most heated debates we've seen in the run-up to the election is that between the Greens and the fishermen on the Tweed. Labor's proposing a suite of marine parks in Commonwealth waters. They include one a few k's off the Tweed-Byron coast. A local marine industry businessman, Keith Douglas, has taken his opposition to this all the way up to the election. He is running for the Australian Fishing and Lifestyle Party. You'll hear from him in just a moment. But first of all, to give you a bit more background, earlier this month, Peter Scott spoke with Peter Garrett about what the marine parks is all about.
What are you proposing for these no-take zones offshore?
Well, we haven't proposed any no-take zones offshore yet, and that's a process that's underway, and it's been underway for some time, and it's got some way to travel. It's a commitment that the Labor government have taken up to have marine protected areas and a system of them around Australia in Commonwealth waters, in other words, 5 k's offshore. And what we've done to begin with is we've identified what we call areas for further assessment, where we will collect information about whether or not there should be planning regimes in those areas, mixed planning regimes that enable the environment, the marine environment, to be protected, and sustainable use of the oceans to continue at the same time. And the process is a very exhaustive one, but what will happen is that we will go through the process of consultation on the areas of further assessment. We'll get advice from scientists and from the information that's relevant about the ocean environment. We'll listen to those that we consult with. I have a stakeholders group made up of the fishing industry that also comes in and sees me through these processes. And then we'll release what's called draft plans for bioregional marine planning. When we release those draft plans, we'll then have another extensive period of consultation.
Environment Minister Peter Garrett there speaking with Coast FM's Peter Scott earlier this month, and on the line is Senate candidate for the Australian Fishing and Lifestyle Party, Keith Douglas. Good morning, Keith. Why is the fishing industry so concerned about these possible marine parks?
Well, quite simply, Ursula, there's no science to support it, and it doesn't pass the common sense rule. And if Peter Garrett is thrown out on his ear after this election, that's where he deserves to be, because the professional fishermen are completely beside themselves about what his department is proposing. And there was I spoke to one of the fellows that attended the last meeting down there, and they said it was just totally unacceptable.
Okay, aside from the science, which neither of us are scientists, what are the implications for the fishing industry if the zones eventually do go ahead?
Look, the implications are huge. I mean, these people have been wound back by, they've cut down fishing boats over the last 20 years as it stands. And there's no actual reason for this to continue, because what it means, for example, you've got Markle's Fishery at Tweed Heads. There's 300 professional fishermen there who are not going to be able to go out and fish the areas that they've been doing, through their entire lives and through their entire period of their businesses. Now, for somebody to suggest that, it just doesn't pass the common sense test when there are no identified benefits for these marine parks. Now, let's go back to the original argument that Bob Brown's putting forward. He's saying that we need these marine parks because 90% of the big fish have gone. Well, that hasn't happened at any time. That is a discredited report, and he should have corrected that in the public. So I appreciate the opportunity to do that this morning on his behalf. He said also that these areas up in nurseries for fish. Well, that's rubbish. The inshore areas are where the nurseries are, and that's where the problems are for fish, not out in the marine parks.
Would you propose further no-fish zones in the estuaries?
Look, it's got nothing to do with fishing. It's not. This is the problem. It's to do with water quality. That is the biggest challenge. Fishing is not a problem. Be it that fishing is currently managed very, very well in Australia. We lead the world. The biggest problems relate to water quality, and that's where the effort has to be concentrated. If people are concerned about fish, start with the water quality, start with the pest problems, start with looking at the pollution issues. Start greening the riverbanks. That's what we should be doing to stop runoff into the estuary areas. Not marine parks won't serve any purpose at all, because most of these fish that pass through them, tuna, snapper, marlin, for example, to use the one that Brown brought up, all these fish are highly migratory, so they're going to move through the areas. This is not you can't apply national park thinking to marine parks. It's a totally different environment.
I know when I go out to fish, local people are often saying to me, I used to be able to catch fish. The Gold Coast is so overfished. Do you disagree with that?
Well, look, the reality is off the Gold Coast, we don't have a lot of reefs. And if you watch the fishing reports with Paul Bird every evening, they're still catching plenty of fish out there. And if you talk to the professional fishermen, they've had the best catches for years of prawns all the way up the entire Queensland coast. The best marlin season out of Cairns and living memory. The best tuna catch ever off New South Wales. So we don't have a problem. The Greens and Labor are trying to create a problem. But very interesting this week, Labor's put out a press release to say that the Greens' ideas are not based on science and their zones aren't based on science. So Labor is trying to push itself away from the Greens because they know this issue alone could determine the outcome of the election.
Okay, there have been some advertisements, I think the Australian Tackle Shops Association perhaps, advertisements showing people fishing off the beaches and how this may implicate recreational fishing, but the reality is that it's 5 odd k's out to sea. Will there be any implications if this marine park goes ahead? Will there be any implications for recreational fishing?
Well, there will. I mean, there are stacks of people that fish northern New South Wales, and we're not talking about closing down. We're talking about the most productive areas being closed. So there are lots of people who recreationally fish off northern New South Wales. And once the federal government does actually put in, if they close a particular area, quite often the states will mirror those closures and reflect them onto the shores. So don't think just because the marine park might be starting a bit offshore that it doesn't stop there. I mean, this whole process has nothing to do with science. There are no identified benefits. It has to be stopped, and they have to start listening to the scientific experts like Dr. Ben Diggles in Brisbane, who knows what he's talking about, Professor Ray Hilborn from the University of Washington. He's a fisheries scientist, and he says we don't need these marine parks to manage our fisheries.
Okay, just one last question before I wrap it up. Environment Minister Peter Garrett was saying there will be consultation here. Would you be prepared to meet Labor halfway on this? Is there...
Look, his consultation from the industry's point of view so far has been totally unsatisfactory. The professional fishermen have told me they've had consultants come out that don't know what they're doing. They can't tell them anything.
Right.
There is no need for consultation when the science is clear. It's just a talk fest.
Thank you for
we
your
need
time.
common sense. Sorry?
Thank you for your time. I'll have to wrap it up.
Okay, thanks, Ursula.
Keith Douglas there, a local marine industry businessman who is running for the Senate on the Australian Fishing and Lifestyle Party ticket.